So I'm very pleased to have three distinguished speakers coming from distinguished universities in these three countries. And somehow, I think some of the presenters mentioned that the data has a huge potential for tackling societal challenges, including environment, sustainability, energy, but then that there are many challenges. So especially we'd like to see what are the key challenges and opportunities in emerging economies. Somehow in Asia, we have many countries and regions which are somehow trying to promote more economic growth, but at the same time tackle societal challenges. So first, I'd like to invite Professor Wanxin Li. She's an associate professor in the School of Energy and Environment in the City University of Hong Kong, and also she's a visiting associate professor in Tsinghua University in China. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. I prepared a few slides for, okay, good. Today, I guess I only have about 10 minutes, so I'll be very quick just to walk you through some of the very basics regarding the ESG information disclosure in China. And that is the task assigned by Masaru. All right. In the next few minutes, sorry, did I? Ask her to change the slide. Did I push this the button? Sorry. Okay, thank you. I shall push this one. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. It's working. I guess I can just quickly refer back to the key messages, especially the key challenges highlighted by the Secretary General of the United Nations at the COP27. And basically, he expressed the concerns about the data quality issues, especially related to net zero commitments. All right. And just to quote exactly what he said, the problem is that the criteria and benchmarks for the net zero commitments have varied levels of rigor and loopholes wide enough to drive a diesel truck through. And this, I guess, can be also relevant for what I'm going to be talking about, the current situations in China as well, probably a lot of other places also. And then he expressed the very high level commitment. We must have zero tolerance for net zero greenwashing. And that actually has been going on quite a lot in the ESG communities and in the financial institutions. And furthermore, he pointed out the four key areas of work. One is environmental integrity, that has to do with whether we should be holding up to the 1.5 degrees Celsius in the global warming. And then credibility of the basically carbon accounting systems and accountability of all those different organizations involved in this business. And the last one is the role of the governments. And what I will be focusing on will be to look at what the government has done in China, because as you all may know, a lot of changes in China have been mainly driven, no matter if it's through the pull or by pushing, then the government has been playing a very important role in the transition towards low carbon development and greener development, etc. So at the global level, one of the major achievements is the global stocktake. And China has been trying to do that, especially that is under the umbrella of green GDP. And then the second one is a breakthrough agreement to provide loss and damage funding for vulnerable countries that hit hard by climate disasters. Even though I wouldn't necessarily call it achievement, it has made financial resources available for the most vulnerable countries. But in terms of what the resources will be needed for the net zero transition, actually not only damages will be recovered, but also preventive measures will have to be taken that has to do with innovations, technological adoptions, diffusion, etc. So if we only look at loss and damages, then I guess that is not the complete picture. And then in terms of the ESG, it is not just to look at the loss and damages, but to look into the future opportunities as well. And in terms of the in-labeling policies regarding the ESG practices, I have tried to put together the packages of financial policies that have been mainly pushing the financial sector to pay attention to the environmental, social, and governance performances of the, basically of their loans projects and also investment projects. It was started in 2002 and then gradually moving from the People's Bank of China to the China Securities Regulatory Commission. And then now all the regulatory commissions in China, including securities and also insurance, etc., they all have been engaged with this business. And the most recent one, okay, let me sit back a little bit. The original push was from the Ministry of Environmental Protection. It has initiated the move to work together with those banking regulators to impose policies and requirements on the listed companies before they can go public. And that requirements has basically set the entry barriers for a lot of probably very profitable companies, but then they actually extract their profits and revenues at the cost of the environment, such as the Zijin Gold Mine Corporation. And then afterwards, not only just to make the entry barriers, but also they check back regularly on the performance of the companies that have already been listed on the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges, and then to check their performances and then to publish their performance to the public through the mass media or on the websites of the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and also link their performances with the you know, in China, a lot of development projects have to be linked with the quota controlled by the central government related to like the land acquisition or the quota to use the electricity, and also the total amount of pollution can be discharged from the companies. So those performances are linked with the assignment or allocation of those quota to the local governments at the provincial level. So in that sense, that will give pressure to the provincial governors and also the environmental protection bureaus at the provincial level to check the corporate environmental and social performances. So in that way, there is a kind of closed loop. And then the most recent one is not just to give pressure through the government hierarchies, but also to give pressure directly on the listed companies. That is the policy rolled out by the state-owned asset supervision and regulatory commission. It required all the listed companies under the control of the central enterprises to voluntarily publish their ESG performance data starting in 2023, so about a month away. And that would be the first move in China, putting direct requirements on the listed companies to publish or compose to publish their ESG data. So that is a very good move. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to let the Shenzhen Stock Exchange and the Shanghai Stock Exchange to pick up that as well. And I guess in the interest of time, I will just stop here. I just wanted to show you this, those two diagrams. If we look at the ESG performance of the corporations, one of the most important aspects that we would like to look into is their discharge of pollutants and also the consumption of energy and electricity, and then the use and transfer of hazardous materials or toxic materials. And those actually have been covered by the law on clean production. For all the companies that have ever exceeded the national standards on those three criteria, or they have exceeded the total amount, the quota assigned to that specific sector in the locality, then those companies have to publish their relevant information. And the most recent check done by the Tsinghua Environmental Data Services Institute, they found actually the level of compliance is very low. So as you can see from the histograms here, and out of the 32 provinces and the regions that they have examined, because the Xinjiang farming group is also included, so there are altogether 33. And then the percentage of the regions in compliance with that law actually is very low. Okay, so in terms of information quality, the amount of information and the quality of information publicly available on the ESG performance of the corporations, I think we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think increasingly ESG has been emphasized by many governments also in the financial sector, but then that the quality and quantity of data is actually fundamental to ensure that they are doing good for the environment. But I think there are many challenges in this area still. Okay, thank you very much. Then I'd like to invite the next speaker, Professor Vigneswara Ilavarasan. Sorry, my pronunciation is completely wrong, I guess. He is a professor at the School of Management in the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, India, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor. I hope you are able to hear me and you are able to see my screen. I'm sorry I couldn't attend it in person. Thank you very much for the invitation. In the next 5 or 7 minutes, what do? I will focus about India. I will basically talk about 4 major things. I will look at the potential of data-led innovation, what is going to happen, what is its present status, what are the challenges, and what can be done. This is what I'm going to cover it in, say, next 6 or 7 minutes or so. So when we talk about potential, Indian government runs this Indian Railways, largest employer, almost one of the largest employers of the world. It opened up a little bit of data related to catering and ticketing. And a lot more startups started doing business around this particular data, which almost composes of 34% of its revenue. So if you extrapolate it, there is a possibility that the startups in this particular country can leverage this open digital ecosystem. It can lead up to $148 billion US. Some calculations we made, and it is likely to contribute 5% of GDP in this country. So when we look at this particular data, there is a lot more potential for data that can bring in. But unfortunately, that is not really happening. Very few companies are working on this. Say, for example, a company like IndiaStat started in 2010. It is doing a lot more work, making use of this open data and giving it for us a premium service. And in Indian market, there is a lot more dark market is available for your personal data, especially for the sales and marketing agencies end up buying your data and using it. So there is a lot more potential in terms of revenue generation, innovation, employment generation, but it is not really happening. Right? What is the present status? Okay, I would say data development or data-led innovation or evidence-making or innovation, I would say that it's a work in progress in this country. The country started looking at it in 2012 in terms of national data sharing and accessibility policy. The thinking is there, it is in the right direction. So we started an open government data platform. It has data for 165 government agencies in 33 sectors. India is a large country. It is having more than 29 different subnationals or states or provinces, we call it. So there is a lot more data flowing in. And the national think tank run by the government is also looking at a national data and analytics platform where it ends up providing a lot of insights for people. But if you look at the if you look at the use, who are the people who are using this particular data, we do not have adequate insights on whether the government is really using it or not. But there's a lot more use by academic economists. We have a lot of research papers coming out, making use of the data that is produced by the government. And we also have occasional sensational media reports end up saying that the rural population is spending more time on mobile talk time compared to cosmetics. Okay, those kind of sensational stories come up once in a while. Otherwise, I do not see much usage of this open data by either by various government agencies or by the private players in order to generate revenues. This is the status in a nutshell. In terms of challenges, there is a problem. Why the usage is very low? One is the quality asymmetry in terms of data provision. There are a lot more missing data sets, is outdated. If you look at data.gov.in, there are a lot of data sets that are coming in, say, 3 years old or 4 years old. It is not really useful for people who are looking at some business models using the recent data. And there are a lot more data provision is dependent on subnational governments. Some of them are belong to the opposition party of the central government. There is always a subnational government and the central government power dynamics is going on. So a lot of times the sharing of the data gets problematic. At the central level, the policy advisory or in terms of regulatory environment, it provides a lot more mixed signals. After long deliberations, we came up with data anonymization and protection guidelines in August 22, but it is again withdrawn because there are a lot more criticism related to it. The government has withdrawn it and reworking on it. For 5 years, we discussed about digital personal data protection bill, and recently a new one got introduced in November. Right. So if you look at it, something gets introduced, there is a lot of feedback, criticism, and we go back on it, and the new thing gets introduced. So there is no clear signal related to this, what we are going to do with the data, whether the monetization is going to happen, or how we can use it for evidence making. It is not very clear. There is also a problem with when we open up the data, the way you are using it needs to be aligned with a good governance image. You cannot say anything very critical about the government. When you start doing it, the sharing of the data gets problematic. For instance, we have a lot more information related to electronic transactions. This is a good story to say that the country is moving in the right direction. Whereas the data related to farmers' suicide or unemployment gets tricky. Either the government delays it, or the way it is being written in various media, newspaper articles or trade press articles, it gets problematic. So the government is slightly skeptical about the usage of the data. So if the data gets opened up, it is being used for business purposes, well and good, but unfortunately it ends up using it for criticism of the government, which government is not really happy about it. Very small scale studies show that the behavioral intention to use is also very low amongst the academics and various other people. When the study asked, okay, whether you are likely to use the open government data, the usage is relatively low. Overall complementary assets in terms of demonstration effect, the decision sciences, we call that data analytics, we call it decision sciences. In the private sector is also still low. The adoption is very low. So you do not see great demonstration in the private sector. Okay, the possibilities of spillover from the private sector to the government sector is not exactly happening. because the adoption is very low in the private sector. These are the various challenges. So what I did, what I just shared is I looked at the potential, what can create, and what is the status, and what are the challenges. Now, what are the possible things one can do? All right. One is awareness about the data or the evidence-based policy making. Basically, the policymakers need to understand clearly saying that data is going to be very useful for them in terms of their work. There is a need for capacity building. The existing machinery is not well equipped to handle this data analytics. People run away from mathematics, and it involves a lot of mathematics. We need a lot of intermediaries to interpret the data and give it in a form where people can consume. There is a problem. We need a clear regulatory environment and advisory positions. Clearly, the government takes a stand saying that we are here for this and we would like to implement this. That is not coming out very clearly. Since we have a very complex arrangement of various states and provinces coming together, there is a state government, there is a central government, there is different kinds of agencies working together. These agencies need to talk to each other. There is a need for a proper national data management and governance structure. This is needed. There is also a need for incentive for the data sharing. As a government agency, when I share the data, what is that I'm going to get? Okay, what is the first order effect? I understand that it is good for national building. It is good for creating innovations and everything. But as a government agency, what do I get out of it? Okay, the first order effects are not very clear. There is no incentive attached to it. So there is a need for it. Personally, I feel that the startup should be encouraged. You open up the data and clearly say that, okay, this data can be useful for thinking of new businesses. And in India, we end up seeing frequent cases, whereas the new age companies are trying to fill these gaps created by the government agencies in terms of service delivery, right? You have a lot more private companies are filling up infrastructure and inadequacies for a profit margin. I would call them as a digital social enterprises. So there is a possibility that we can encourage them. Once you start encouraging it, what happens? The data is available, and this particular startup should be able to make use of it and fill a lot more needs. It ends up delivering the developmental goals. So these are the possible things we can do. So with this, I'll stop. I'll be happy to take the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vignes. This is such an excellent talk about all the challenges you face in using data for innovation, and also some of the challenges like data sharing, and also the regulatory framework to encourage all these incentives. So thank you very much. And then I'd like to invite Professor Sherwin Ona. He's associate professor in the LaSalle University in the Philippines, and he's also heavily involved in data governance and data policy in the Philippines. Oh, he cannot. Oh, okay. Okay, it's very unfortunate that he will not be able to join. So perhaps I'd like to move on to ask questions. Particularly now we have speakers from China and India, the largest economies in the world. And because of the sheer size of the economies, and there should be many challenges in encouraging the use of data. I actually have a question to the Wanxin. Well, I think that ESG is such a big topic, and then data is one of the key components for facilitating ESG. And now, increasingly, particularly after the climate change discussion, then now we are talking about the scope-free data. So not only your own company, but also you need to trace the whole emissions through the supply chain. So how China is going to address this challenge? Because it's really about the data sharing among companies and also the governments, but this really requires some solid the institutional environment to encourage all the stakeholders to share the data and to use the data. So how China is going to address this huge challenge?
In terms of tracking the transactions, as you may know, the value-added tax in China, actually that could potentially facilitate that exercise, because that value-added tax itself is to track the additional production processes occurred in the, basically in the supply chain. So through that, it may be possible to also trace what kind of resources and amount of energy, etc., have been carried out within the supply chain. But then if we also look nowadays at the corporations that have already shifted their operations somewhere else, not within the country borders, then I'm not sure how that could be done. And also, if we trace the scope 3, which may not necessarily be a very bad thing for China itself, because if we look at the consumption occurred in the US or in Europe, then they may have to also share the burden of that imported carbon emissions somewhere outside their geographical boundaries. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I also have a question to Vignesh about the situation in India. For example, in India, I think you have a very kind of, I would say, ambitious the approach to data. For example, Aadhaar system, that they really are trying to collect all the personal information and then try to use it for many applications. At the same time, as I mentioned, that now it seems to be some of the policy proposals have been withdrawn because of all the I guess the oppositions and criticisms to these sort of ambitious approach. So, how do you see the future of the Indian the government to try to address this the collection and use of data? Somehow you have very ambitious the ideas, but at the same time you have also need to deal with all the political oppositions and criticisms. So how do you see the future with regard to this the policies in this area?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Masaru. I would take this question looking at historically what India is doing related to reforms or policy interventions. People call that as reforms by stealth, right? So you tell people that we are going to move 5 steps, and there is a lot of criticism. You step back 2 steps, but still you have moved 3 steps. So what you do is you introduce a bill, you introduce a draft of the policy guidelines, and there is a lot of criticism. You dilute it a little bit, but still you are moving in the same direction. Overall, the government is positive about using the data for developmental purposes. They are exploring ways by which we can monetize it. They are looking at ways by which we can improve the governance. So if it gets reflected by the statements made by the Prime Minister, if you look at the amount of investment being made in various initiatives, all these things show us that is going in the right direction. But then we are a democratic country, and every 5 years we have elections. Okay, we cannot completely ignore the opposition party. So we need to make a little bit of adjustments. Those adjustments sometimes end up derailing this entire activity. But in this case, I do not see the derailing happening. But if you look at it, we started in 2012. So we are talking about only 10 years, the data. So when you look at electronic governance discourse or electronic governance related research, we started computerizing at the back end very late, right? So we started computerizing it, automating the process. Now we are moving into the next stage saying that, okay, there are a lot of data has been accumulated. What can we do about it? We are going in that particular direction. We are slow. We are a work in progress. We are going in the right direction, but the process is going to be slower. That will be my take. I don't think we are going to close everything completely down and a strict censorship. That kind of situation will not arise, but we are going slow. That will be my take.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, and then I'd like to ask the audience to ask any questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering, currently we're talking about, technology and policy, right? So the fact is that technology far advanced beyond policy. So when we come to so-called making policy, the technology is already gone, right? So in what way are we talking about, technology and policy and AI and how we try to control in so-called narratives, like what we're doing right now, talking about having a conversation, having this when the technologies already go way beyond what we could even talk about. I just want to have a conversation. So I could keep asking questions. Yeah. So this is what this conference is about, right?
Yeah. So probably this can be addressed in the context of what is called the pacing problem, in the sense that technological change is so fast, but then that the regulators and decision makers may not be able to catch up with the speed of technological change, and also policies cannot be changed so quickly. So how and this kind of asymmetry of change between the technological speed and then to policy making. So I'd like to ask
if I may interrupt. So this is I'm not the first one who is saying this. Technology are not being built in government, right? So the government are only following up, and then making policies. But the thing is that the technologist and who actually knows what's going on, it's not in the government.
Yeah, okay, so thank you.
What kind of apology can we possibly make?
Yeah, sorry, because of the time constraint, I'd like to ask the speakers to answer to your question. So Wanxin or Vignesh?
Okay, I'll just take a first cut. I may not be able to fully address your question. It is a very big question, actually. I think a lot of people are worried about the data privacy and also the basically not tyranny sometimes already, right? The tech companies would misuse and abuse their high or very advanced level of knowledge on information and then to manipulate and to their advantages. So that has been going on. But then to what extent the government can probably make good use of those machineries and technology for the common good. I think there are a lot of opportunities as well. So, for example, in the social media, people are free to express their opinions, and then those opinions, if they are actually tapped into the policymaking processes, it will help the government and also probably even corporate decision makers to understand the people's preferences. That is already going on in the commercial world. They will do targeted advertisement already, but then for the government, if they really want to make good use of the limited resources and also to meet the needs that would be probably personalized needs of their constituencies, then that information reviewed through the social media platforms could be a very good source to draw upon. And also, if we talk about other issues, like if we want to trace the ESG performance in terms of verification and auditing, especially related to social aspects, then the advanced information technologies could also be useful. I think technology itself doesn't have to take a side, either positive or negative, just like the atomic bombs, right? Not the technology itself can become can be used in the way that would help people, but at the same time, it could also be used to damage people. So I hope in terms of literacy, probably not only the government, but also scholars, just like myself, or I cannot speak for others, of course. But then I think for me, I really want to catch up with the new developments in the technologies and to understand more how I can better engage with the discussions and debates related to data and policy.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Vignesh to respond.
Thank you very much for this wonderful question. I would say this question is not really new. This is around 2000 years old. So when you construct a road, people are being asked who's going to benefit. Right? Is there an urban bias? Okay. Or you introduce colleges, say that why not more schools? Why are you talking about college? Right. This conversation is always needed. Right. In terms of why do we really need doing this, or this is really needed. This conversation is really needed. For that matter, the kind of conferences what we are having this conversation is important for us to understand it. Number one. Number two, policy is going to be always delayed in terms of technological change. Okay, how are you responding to it? The response is going to come in two ways. One is whether it's going to be harmful to people. Right, I allow this particular technology to flourish, whether it's going to harm the people. So as a state, it is my responsibility to take care of people. So I will do something about it. That's number one. So in order to do this, I need to see the consequences. I need to see the impact. All right. People were smoking in public places over a period of time. We saw the consequences. You stop smoking. Okay. You say that, no, you cannot smoke in public places. The second one is when you need investment. Right. Say, for example, you need to spend this taxpayers' money in building this infrastructure. So you cannot build an infrastructure which cannot be used more than, say, for example, if it cannot be used more than 5 years, it's waste of money. We cannot do this. So we need to wait and see, estimate whether it is going to be really useful. Okay, for a longer time, whether it's a return on investment is for the taxpayers' money, we end up doing it. So in order to look at that impact, in order to understand what is a potential impact it's going to create in terms of infrastructure, we need time. So there is going to be always a lag. Okay, since there is a lag, should we stop having the conversation? I don't think so. We should continue having this conversation. At least when we are taking decisions, the decisions are informed decisions. That will be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This is such a big topic to discuss, but then the time is now up. So thank you very much, Professor Lee, and also Vignesh for their excellent talks. And thank you very much.
Thank you.